What happens when you give an entitled retiree unlimited room service and absolutely no daily responsibilities? They lose their minds. Forget the glamorous brochures about retiring at sea. We are diving straight into the unfiltered chaos. Here are 12 entirely unbelievable, deeply shameless stories of permanent cruise ship residents who forgot how the actual world works. 1. Tell me, what does your ideal morning routine look like? Coffee on the porch? A brisk walk? For Leonard, a 71-year-old retired orthodontist from Ohio, who had been living on a 4,000-passenger megaship for 11 consecutive months, mornings were a highly orchestrated aquatic ritual. Leonard didn't just use the adults-only solarium hot tub. He legally annexed it every morning at exactly 6:15. At first, it started innocently enough with him simply being the first one in the water. But when you live on a cruise ship full-time, the boundaries between a public luxury amenity and your own master bathroom begin to blur terribly. By month 3, Leonard had stopped wearing a standard swimsuit and transitioned to what can only be described as a watertight neoprene tuxedo brief. He started bringing a custom bamboo bath caddy, which he casually stretched across the bubbling water to hold his waterproof tablet, an espresso, and a battery-operated waterproof beard trimmer. The escalation was gradual but absolute. Other early rising passengers would approach the steaming tub, towels in hand, only to find Leonard submerged to his chest, aggressively flossing his teeth and watching financial news at maximum volume without headphones. When a newlywed couple from Toronto bravely attempted to slip into the opposite end of the 12-person jacuzzi, Leonard didn't say a word. He simply reached into a waterproof canvas tote bag, pulled out a massive, family-sized bag of lavender-scented Epsom salts, and dumped the entire 5-pound contents directly into the public filtration system, instantly turning the water into a cloudy, heavily perfumed soup. He then produced a wooden loofah on an extended pole and began vigorously scrubbing his shoulder blades. The sheer awkwardness of the situation drove the couple out in under 4 minutes. But the absolute climax of Leonard's aquatic dominance didn't come from a confrontation with a passenger. It happened when the solarium deck supervisor finally approached the tub and politely informed Leonard that personal grooming was strictly prohibited in the public pools. Leonard paused his beard trimmer, slowly lowered his bamboo bath caddy, and marched straight to the hotel director's office in his dripping wet neoprene briefs, where he furiously submitted a 4-page written complaint demanding that the ship's maintenance crew adjust the jacuzzi jets because they were no longer providing adequate water pressure for his morning deep tissue scalp massage. 2. There is an astonishing level of stinginess that can only be achieved by someone who has already paid $80,000 to live on a luxury liner for half a year. Let me introduce you to Margaret, a 70-year-old retired postal worker from Ohio, who possessed a pathological hatred for the ship's specialty coffee shop prices. She flatly refused to pay $4 for an herbal tea. Instead, she viewed the complimentary buffet beverage station as her own personal wholesale supply warehouse. Every morning at exactly 6:30, Margaret would arrive at the buffet hauling a massive, floral print canvas tote bag. She wouldn't just take a couple of chamomile packets for her cabin. She would systematically empty the entire wooden display box, violently sweeping dozens of premium, silk pyramid tea bags directly into her bag like a bank robber filling a duffel with unmarked bills. But Margaret wasn't hoarding them to drink. She was running a transnational export business. Every time the ship docked in a major port, she would march straight to the local post office and mail massive vacuum-sealed bags of the ship's stolen tea back to her daughter, who was using the maritime contraband to stock her small independent cafe in Cincinnati. The entire rogue logistics empire collapsed, not because the crew caught her, but because Margaret marched up to guest services in the middle of a formal night, slammed a stack of international shipping receipts onto the marble counter, and furiously demanded the cruise line reimburse her for $90 in Bahamian postage, arguing that the ship's failure to provide a complimentary mailing service was severely impacting her small business profit margins. 3. There is hoarding extra food for your cabin, and then there is the absolute brazen capitalism of Stanley and Joanne. This retired couple from upstate New York had been sailing the Mediterranean for roughly 5 months, and they had quietly observed that the late-night snack options on their specific premium vessel were incredibly lacking after 11 o'clock. Seeing a massive gap in the market, Joanne repurposed her oversized motorized mobility scooter into a covert culinary delivery vehicle. Every afternoon at the buffet, she would systematically clear out the most high-value items, aggressively sweeping entire trays of prosciutto, aged cheddar cubes, and chocolate-dipped strawberries directly into a series of airtight plastic containers hidden in the scooter's heavily modified undercarriage basket. She operated with the mechanical efficiency of a factory assembly line, completely ignoring the terrified stares of the culinary staff. By midnight, when the main dining venues were dark and the ship's bars were full of hungry passengers, Stanley would set up shop in a dimly lit corner of the casino. He didn't gamble. Instead, he quietly operated a black market charcuterie syndicate, selling Joanne's stolen buffet cheese boards to intoxicated passengers for $20 a pop, strictly accepting cash or casino chips. The underground operation ran flawlessly for 3 weeks, until Stanley got a little too arrogant with his supply chain and tried to aggressively upsell the ship's undercover security officer a slightly warm, foil-wrapped shrimp ring at 1 in the morning. 4. Now, I need you to mentally picture the sheer amount of stubbornness required to completely vanish on a moving city of steel simply because you didn't want to pack your bags. Turnaround day is the most chaotic 12 hours on any cruise ship. Thousands of passengers disembark, the vessel is violently scrubbed from top to bottom, and thousands more board. For Theodore, a 79-year-old retired real estate broker, turnaround day in Miami meant the official end of his 10-month residency contract. He was supposed to get off. He didn't want to get off. So he decided that the expiration of his legal ticket was merely a clerical suggestion. Theodore meticulously planned a highly sophisticated ghost protocol. On the morning, everyone was shuffling toward the crowded exit gangway with their luggage, clutching their passports and customs forms. Theodore completely disappeared. Rather than simply hiding in a dark utility closet or under a stateroom bed like a common stowaway, the elderly broker utilized his encyclopedic knowledge of the vessel's security blind spots, a mental map he had developed that genuinely rivaled the ship's original architects. The phantom resident seamlessly slipped into a heavy-duty crew stairwell on Deck 4, bypassed the biometric disembarkation scanners using a stolen laundry cart for cover, and casually rode the steel service elevator all the way up to the completely empty, closed-for-cleaning adults-only solarium. For the next 3 weeks, Theodore lived on a 5,000-passenger megaship entirely as a phantom. Without a cabin, survival meant sleeping exclusively on the heated ceramic loungers in the spa's thermal suite, wrapped in massive piles of clean towels. Meals required a similar level of tactical genius. Relying entirely on an extensive knowledge of the daily schedule, our stowaway crashed complimentary welcome aboard champagne receptions, aggressively loaded plates with hors d'oeuvres at art gallery auctions, and seamlessly blended into large family reunion groups at the buffet by swapping between brightly colored, generic tropical shirts. The ship's security team eventually realized there was a lingering discrepancy in the digital manifest. They initiated a massive, discreet manhunt. They reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage, occasionally catching glimpses of Theodore walking briskly through a corridor at 2 in the morning in a plush bathrobe, carrying a plate of stolen prosciutto. They couldn't physically catch him because he operated with the stealth of a highly trained maritime ninja. But here is the extraordinary, reality-bending twist to his evasion. When the chief of security finally cornered Theodore on Deck 15, the elderly man wasn't hiding in a ventilation shaft or running for his life. He was standing confidently at a wooden podium inside the ship's corporate conference center. Theodore was wearing a completely fabricated, official-looking name tag, and he had used a stolen HDMI cable to hook his iPad up to the room's giant projector. The security team froze in absolute disbelief as they realized Theodore was actively hosting a massive, unauthorized seminar for 60 newly boarded passengers. The title of the slide on the screen behind him was Strategic Maritime Loopholes: How to Maximize Your Retirement at Sea. Theodore hadn't just been surviving as a stowaway, this man was actively monetizing his illegal presence. The brazen retiree charged gullible tourists $200 a head in cash, teaching them exactly how to evade the ship's own security personnel, complete with detailed maps of the camera blind spots. When the furious hotel director finally marched into the room to have him arrested for trespassing and fraud, Theodore didn't panic. The unbothered speaker calmly clicked to his final presentation slide, turned to the deeply invested audience and loudly announced that witnessing a live, practical demonstration of a hostile security extraction was precisely why they had paid the premium VIP seminar fee. 5. Living on a luxury cruise ship for 7 consecutive months radically alters a person's definition of private property. Take Diane, a 64-year-old retired florist from Texas who decided her inside cabin lacked the proper ambiance for relaxation. Her solution was to culturally annex one of the heated ceramic loungers in the ship's premium thermal suite. She didn't just use the lounger, she essentially signed a lease on it. By month 4, Diane was arriving at the spa at 8 in the morning equipped like she was preparing to cross the tundra. She brought her own hand-stitched floral quilts, a battery-operated reading lamp that she clamped to the mosaic tiles, and a completely bizarre collection of framed ceramic cats, which she carefully arranged around her heated slab. She treated the ultra-luxurious, silent wellness center exactly like a suburban living room. If another passenger even glanced at the adjacent empty lounger, Diane would loudly sigh, aggressively rustle her giant newspaper, and glare at them over her reading glasses until they retreated to the sauna. Her complete detachment from reality peaked when she marched out to the spa reception desk, still wearing her fluffy white bathrobe and a green clay face mask, and fiercely demanded to know why the ship's housekeeping staff hadn't watered the artificial bamboo plant she had personally placed next to her lounger to establish a property line. 6. I want you to consider how much free time a person must possess to willingly take on unpaid security shifts during their own vacation. Martin, a 73-year-old retired insurance adjuster from Illinois, had been living aboard a massive 4,000-passenger megaship for almost a year. Over those hundreds of days, he developed a terrifying obsession with the main dining room's smart casual dress code. Because he considered the ship his permanent residence, he viewed anyone wearing shorts in his dining room as a direct, hostile invasion of his home. Every evening at exactly 5:30, Martin would position himself directly in front of the ornate mahogany entrance doors. He wore a pristine, custom-tailored tuxedo, regardless of the actual evening dress code, and stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, arms firmly clasped behind his back, resembling an extremely senior nightclub bouncer. As unsuspecting passengers approached for their dinner reservations, Martin would systematically intercept them. He didn't work for the ship, he had absolutely no authority, yet he operated with the chilling confidence of a federal inspector. He would look a confused young tourist up and down, slowly shake his head, and calmly inform them that their khaki shorts were a severe violation of maritime elegance, physically pointing them toward the buffet elevators. The actual dining room hosts were entirely terrified of him. Whenever they tried to intervene, Martin would pull out a dog-eared, heavily highlighted copy of the cruise line's terms and conditions from 2018 and quote, Section 4, Paragraph 2, regarding proper evening attire. The situation reached a spectacular boiling point during a holiday sailing. A large group of Australian friends tried to enter wearing perfectly acceptable, expensive linen trousers. Martin stepped directly into their path, extended his left palm like a traffic cop, and declared their footwear too casual for his standards. When the group sensibly ignored him and walked right past, Martin didn't yell. Instead, he marched over to the host stand, stole a massive velvet rope stanchion, dragged the heavy brass pole across the carpet, and successfully barricaded the portside dining room entrance, aggressively guarding the perimeter with his wife's walking cane until the hotel director physically lured him away with a complimentary bottle of vintage port. 7. Have you ever met someone so accustomed to wielding local suburban authority that they attempt to enforce it in international waters? Enter Susan, a 70-year-old former Homeowners Association president from Florida. She had been a full-time resident on a massive American megaship for 9 consecutive months, and the total lack of a rigid neighborhood hierarchy was driving her absolutely insane. To Susan, the ship wasn't a luxury vacation resort. It was an unregulated, chaotic, floating subdivision that desperately needed her iron-fisted leadership. Her primary nemesis was the ship's official daily newsletter, the printed itinerary delivered to every cabin each evening. Susan strongly disagreed with the cruise director's scheduling choices. She felt that a poolside steel drum band at 2 in the afternoon was highly disruptive to her digestion, and she deemed the evening karaoke sessions far too boisterous for a civilized vessel. So she simply took matters into her own hands. Susan marched down to the ship's internet cafe and used her decades of HOA experience to forge a meticulously accurate, perfectly formatted replica of the official daily program. Then, she weaponized her premium unlimited printing package. In the dead of night, wearing a dark velour tracksuit and silent orthotic sneakers, Susan would quietly walk the entirety of Deck 11, systematically sliding her counterfeit schedules under hundreds of cabin doors. Her revised itineraries were absolute masterpieces of shameless self-interest. She officially canceled the loud belly flop competition and replaced it with mandatory quiet reading hour on the Lido deck. She completely rerouted the ship's afternoon pub crawl to the lower promenade because she didn't want any foot traffic near her starboard side door. The truly unbelievable part was that the newly boarded tourists, who never questioned a printed piece of paper with a corporate logo on it, blindly followed her instructions. The ship's highly paid entertainment staff would show up with microphones to host a massive deck party, only to find an entirely empty pool area and a single handwritten sign taped to the bar stating the zone was temporarily closed for Susan's afternoon reflection period. The rogue operation lasted for 12 glorious days before the actual cruise director caught her red-handed on the security cameras at 3 in the morning, aggressively stuffing her fake newsletters into the luxury suite mailboxes. When the incredibly frustrated hotel management team called her into a closed-door meeting and threatened to terminate her residency contract for orchestrating mass maritime sabotage, Susan didn't flinch or offer a single apology. She simply reached into her leather handbag, slid an itemized receipt across the polished mahogany desk, and calmly demanded that the cruise line immediately reimburse her for the $42 she spent on high-yield printer toner to fix their completely incompetent activity schedule. 8. Sometimes the absolute worst behavior is disguised as charming ingenuity. You might think you know how to creatively avoid a crowded lunch buffet, but I guarantee you lack the sheer, unadulterated audacity of these next two passengers. George and Linda, a retired couple from Arizona, had spent 5 months on a massive luxury vessel and possessed a pathological hatred for the midday dining rush. Their solution was to convert one of the ship's spectacular midship glass elevators into their own private climate-controlled scenic dining room. Every day at exactly noon, they would load up 2 massive trays with prime rib, mashed potatoes, and gravy, carry them directly into elevator number 4, and push the buttons for all 18 decks. They actually brought a compact, foldable camping table from their cabin, set it up right in the middle of the glass box, and calmly ate their lunch while smoothly gliding up and down the ship's magnificent central atrium, admiring the panoramic ocean views. If a group of passengers attempted to board on Deck 7, the steel doors would slide open to reveal George, casually chewing on a piece of sourdough bread, staring back at them over a sprawling spread of buffet delicacies. He wouldn't offer to make room or collapse the table. He wouldn't apologize. He would simply pick up a spare linen napkin, gently hand it to the incredibly confused family trying to get to the pool deck, and politely inform them that this specific dining car was currently at maximum capacity and they would need to wait for the next available table. 9. It takes a very specific, terrifying kind of mathematical dedication to treat a cruise ship loyalty program like a hostile corporate takeover. For Howard and Evelyn, a pair of 74-year-old retired actuaries from Chicago, their permanent residency on a massive 4,000-passenger megaship was not a vacation. It was a complex mathematical extraction mission. Cruise lines offer incredibly lucrative perks for their highest-tier loyalty members, things like complimentary laundry, priority boarding, and, most importantly, a free luxury suite upgrade once a year. Howard and Evelyn calculated that reaching this mythical pinnacle status required accumulating 10,000 points. You earn points by spending money, of course, but the casino's optical card readers also awarded fractional points simply for the duration of time spent actively playing at a slot machine, regardless of the bet size. Armed with this knowledge, the couple essentially formed a 2-person, unregulated maritime labor union. They selected a highly specific, terribly unpopular penny slot machine located in the darkest corner of the casino, one that featured a jarring, repetitive dolphin squeak every time the reels spun. They did not play to win. They played to exist. They instituted a ruthless, military-style 24-hour shift schedule. Howard would take the machine from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, wearing medical-grade compression socks and a neck pillow, methodically betting a single penny every 45 seconds to keep the optical sensor active. At precisely 2 o'clock, Evelyn would arrive with a thermos of lukewarm green tea and seamlessly take over the controls without the machine ever registering a pause in play. They did this for 3 solid months. They completely ignored the Mediterranean ports outside. They didn't see Rome, they saw flashing neon dolphins. The casino staff was completely bewildered. The couple wasn't breaking any actual rules, but they were occupying a machine and consuming roughly 14 complimentary bottles of water a day while spending a grand total of maybe $8 a week. The situation escalated when the casino manager, desperate to get them out of his venue, personally approached them with a complimentary dinner voucher for the premium steakhouse, gently suggesting they take an evening off. Howard didn't even look away from the spinning reels. He simply pulled a laminated Excel spreadsheet from his vest pocket, tapped a specific column with his pen, and informed the manager that a $50 steak did not mathematically compensate for the 28 loyalty points he would lose during a 2-hour dinner. The magnificent, reality-bending twist arrived on day 94, while the ship was crossing the Atlantic. The machine finally chimed, and their account officially rolled over into the ultimate, top-tier loyalty status. The casino manager, breathing a sigh of relief that this psychological torture was over, arrived with a bottle of champagne and their new solid metal platinum cards. Howard accepted the card, immediately hit the cash-out button on his $4 of winnings, and then reached into his briefcase. He handed the utterly stunned manager a 32-page professionally bound legal document. It wasn't a thank you note. It was a highly detailed consulting invoice. Howard had spent the last 3 months cataloging exactly 14 distinct software glitches in the cruise line's slot machine algorithms. He calmly informed the manager that he would be forwarding this forensic audit directly to the International Gaming Commission, unless the cruise line immediately waived their monthly residency fees for the next 2 years and provided Evelyn with unlimited, unrestricted access to the thermal spa. They had never cared about the free luxury suite upgrade. They had orchestrated a 3-month maritime corporate espionage operation purely to blackmail the ship into giving them free massages. 10. Living on a luxury line for half a year requires a certain level of financial stamina. But Patricia, a 66-year-old former real estate broker from Nevada, figured out a brilliant way to heavily subsidize her liquid diet. Every cruise ship has an art gallery, and every sea day features a sprawling, high-pressure art auction complete with complimentary glasses of cheap sparkling wine to loosen up potential buyers. Patricia had absolutely zero interest in taking home a framed watercolor of a dolphin. She treated the gallery exclusively as her personal, unlimited open bar. For 8 straight weeks, she attended every single auction, taking a seat in the second row and deploying a highly sophisticated strategy of aggressive nodding. She would make intense, thoughtful eye contact with the auctioneer, furrowing her brow at the brushstrokes of a generic landscape, all while blindly extending her right hand sideways into the aisle so the roaming waitstaff could continually refill her flute. She drank like a thirsty camel at an oasis, consuming an average of 11 glasses of bubbly per session without ever raising a bidding paddle. When the gallery director caught on to her scheme and instructed the waiters to bypass her entirely, Patricia simply showed up the next afternoon wearing oversized dark sunglasses and a wide-brimmed straw hat, carrying an empty insulated steel thermos hidden inside a hollowed-out knitting bag. The ruse ended spectacularly when she successfully siphoned 2 full bottles worth of wine into her thermos over an hour, stood up abruptly to leave, misjudged her own level of intoxication, and loudly tripped over a decorative easel, immediately offering the horrified auctioneer $42 in cash for a shattered Thomas Kincaid replica. 11. There is a profound difference between privately complaining about a show and actively attempting to commandeer a live theatrical production. Robert, a 75-year-old former community theater director from Connecticut, was on his 2nd consecutive year living aboard a premium European vessel. Because the ship's grand evening production shows operated on a strict, unvarying 6-month rotation, Robert had watched the exact same glittery, high-energy Broadway tribute performance approximately 120 times. He no longer viewed himself as a passenger. He considered himself the uncredited executive producer of the entire vessel. Every performance night, Robert would arrive 45 minutes early to claim the exact dead center seat in the front row. Applause was entirely out of the question, and a smile never crossed his face. Instead, the self-appointed critic arrived armed with a heavy leather-bound notebook, a battery-powered clip-on reading light, and a small handheld whiteboard, evaluating the terrified dancers with the cold, unblinking intensity of a military tribunal. Whenever the lead singer missed a high note or a dancer was half a step behind the choreography, Robert would loudly click his tongue, violently cross out a page in his notebook, and immediately write a giant number between 1 and 10 on his whiteboard, holding it up for the entire theater to see. The performers were having psychological breakdowns in the dressing rooms. The cruise director practically begged him to stop, offering him front-row tickets to a private comedy show instead. But Robert firmly declared that the integrity of the theatrical arts was not for sale. The absolute peak of his sociopathic dedication occurred during the grand finale of a formal night gala. The stage crew accidentally triggered the confetti cannons about 3 seconds too early. Robert didn't just hold up a 0 on his whiteboard. He stood up in his tuxedo, blew a literal silver coach's whistle he had smuggled into the theater, and yelled "cut" at the top of his lungs. He then marched straight to the guest relations desk, bypassed a line of 30 people, and submitted a typed 6-page grievance demanding that the entire technical crew be immediately demoted to the laundry department because their horrific comedic timing had personally caused him deep emotional distress. 12. Have you ever witnessed someone exert so much pure, concentrated entitlement that it actually warps the physical reality around them? Allow me to introduce you to Beverly and Eugene, a couple in their late 70s from a wealthy suburb of Miami who had been living on a mid-sized European cruise ship for 14 consecutive months. For the first few weeks of their nautical residency, they were relatively normal, albeit a bit demanding. But by month 6, prolonged exposure to 24-hour room service and daily towel animals had completely severed their connection to the real world. Their descent into absolute madness centered entirely around table 64, a prime window seat in the main dining room. They didn't just request this table, they culturally annexed it. Because they viewed the ship as their permanent condominium, they decided the standard maritime decor was unacceptable. One evening in port, they purchased a heavy embroidered silk tablecloth, a massive crystal vase, and a set of solid silver salt and pepper shakers, which they simply left on table 64 permanently. They even brought their own custom-made orthotic dining chairs on board, forcing the maitre d' to store the ship's actual chairs in a hidden service closet. If other passengers were accidentally seated at table 64 during breakfast, a meal with open seating, Beverly would not yell or cause a scene. She would simply stand 2 inches behind the offending passenger's chair, breathing heavily and softly, whispering a countdown from 10 until they felt so profoundly uncomfortable they abandoned their half-eaten omelets and fled. Eugene had developed a habit of treating the assistant waiters like his personal estate staff, frequently handing them handwritten laminated schedules detailing exactly how many ice cubes were permitted in his water glass depending on the current ambient humidity of the room. The couple even began conducting bizarre, unsolicited performance reviews, pulling waiters aside during the dinner rush to grade their bread-serving posture on a 10-point scale. The ship's management tolerated this unbelievable behavior purely because Beverly and Eugene were spending the equivalent of a small nation's GDP on their continuous suite bookings. But every reign of terror hits a breaking point. The escalation climaxed when Eugene decided that the executive chef's menu was merely a light suggestion. He began demanding dishes that had never existed on the ship. Things like a highly specific veal scallopini that required a particular brand of capers physically helicopter in at the next port. When the hotel director finally grew a spine and politely informed the couple that the kitchen could no longer accommodate entirely off-menu, personalized catering operations, Beverly didn't throw a tantrum. Instead, she executed a twist so completely unhinged it became maritime legend. She smiled warmly, accepted the news, and went back to her cabin. The very next evening, Beverly and Eugene arrived at the dining room for formal night, but they didn't walk to table 64. They walked directly into the grand atrium, where they had secretly paid 3 off-duty crew members from the engine department to haul their custom dining chairs, the silk tablecloth, and the crystal vase right into the center of the ship's main walkway. Then, in front of hundreds of staring passengers, Beverly pulled out her cell phone, opened a popular food delivery app, and used the ship's premium satellite internet to successfully order 2 massive pizzas from a local restaurant in the Italian port they were currently docked in. The delivery guy actually drove right up to the terminal gangway, where Eugene slipped a confused security guard $50 to physically walk the cardboard box up the ramp and onto the ship. The sheer absurdity of watching a man in a tailored tuxedo eat a lukewarm pepperoni slice off a solid silver platter while sitting in a busy hallway finally broke the management. The ship was forced to surrender, quietly reinstating their personalized menu the next day, while Beverly casually remarked to the completely defeated hotel director that the local pizza was a bit too doughy for her liking anyway. Let's be brutally honest. If you had their money and zero shame, which one of these illegal cruise ship monopolies would you run? The underground cheese syndicate or the casino takeover? Confess your retirement crimes in the comments. Subscribe and like this video so I can keep exposing these floating asylums, because nobody else is going to warn you about these people.